All right, you guys ready to rock? So let's have everyone stand up, and we'll get the blood moving just a little bit. Let's do this. Like, why sit? I mean, life's short. We're gonna make it longer today, so appreciate you guys being here because there's a lot of really cool tech stuff that you guys are covering that I know nothing about, but I'm gonna talk to you about health and some of the technical things you can do in your own life. So what we're gonna do is a brand new form of therapy that was invented 2,500 years ago. It's called Qigong. So if you get in a horse stance, so I grew up on a cattle ranch in Idaho, so I'm a bit of a redneck, full disclosure. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna breathe in and bring your palms up right underneath your armpits and then breathe out. So come up on your tippy toes if you can. And bring it down. There you go. Okay, we're gonna speed her up just a little bit. Just get the energy in the room. Okay, how many of you shoot bow and arrow? A lot, right? Okay, well. Oh, good, we got one. All right, so today you're gonna shoot the bow and arrow. So this is your tech neck antidote. So what you're gonna do is just draw the bow in and really squeeze your scapulas together and then release it. And then the other side. And exhale, release it. Inhale and release. Okay, now the last one, and this one is you're gonna cup your hands and it gets all the lymphatic drainage going. So in case you need some detoxification, we're just gonna do it today because I'm assuming there was some debauchery last night. So cup your hands like this, and then you're gonna start on your inside of your ankles and just work your way up. So slap as hard as you can. I know it's weird, slap harder. I want to hear it. Slap a little harder. There we go. Now left arm, palm up. There we go. Palm down. Going to activate all the meridians in your body. Palm up. Right arm, palm down. Okay, now we're all going to come right here. This is where all the waste kind of drains down. And then we're going to count to 3. And we're going to clap together. 1, 2, 3. That was pretty good. Let's try one more time. Okay, ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3. That was beautiful. So, growing up on a ranch, you guys feel a little energized? So growing up on a ranch, I learned a lot about how to sprint about 10 miles in cowboy boots every day. I learned that if you do that over time and you squeeze your feet into small structures, it starts to ruin them. And then one of the first experiences I had of seeing how the body can heal itself is when I had surgery on my feet. And I was tackled in football and it hyperextended one of my toes. And it was like, all right, we got to get these feet taken care of. And as I was, recovering from the surgery, I just used visualization. My dad got me this book called Inner Athlete by Dan Millman. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend it. And that got me into this whole idea. I was 13 at the time, and I was like, there's a lot that can happen in the body, and I became fascinated with the biology and physiology. I had an uncle who was a doctor who was motivating to me. But one of the purposes I have of being here is I do have the pleasure. I've been able to work with Sonny, work with Cam, but I've worked with Sonny. We've been friends for a couple of years. I've been able to work with him on his health. But he has a goal to bring health back into the tech space. And so I said, well, I can't do it alone. You're going to have to bring the Navy SEALs in. So he brought the Navy SEALs in for you guys, and now, hopefully you guys took advantage of that. But this is one of my clients. His name's Manuel, and he lives in Monaco, and he's got this big investment firm. But he was in his late 50s, kind of early 60s, and I started working with him. But he had, let his health go. And he started realizing, like, man, I'm overweight. I look, older than I am. I feel a lot older than I am. Have any of you ever felt older than what you are? And you're like, what is going on here? Because, after about the age of 35, the universe just wants to recycle us. Does anyone notice that? It doesn't care anymore. It's like, hey, can you just make the back pain go away? It's like, no, you're not taking care of yourself, so out. So I want to show you how to fight back. But one thing he noticed is that he made this massive transformation to the point where within a year you didn't recognize him. And what Manuel said when we first started working together, he said, hey, I have so many people in Europe who I want to introduce you to. Have any of you been to Monaco before? Little tiny country. Every car is like a Rolls Royce, Lamborghini, Bentleys. I'm like, these guys need some better taste in vehicles, was my first thought when I was there. But otherwise, I was like, no Dodges, like where's the Chevys? But he said, I want to bring you out and introduce you to all my friends and my investors in Europe. And so I was out there in July, and it was phenomenal. But when I saw Manuel again, I hadn't seen him in a year. I was like, barely recognized him. But he said, everybody sees the tip of the iceberg, but they have no idea the work that goes on underneath it. How many of you are business owners in here? How many of you feel like everyone just sees this, but you know all the work that it takes to run a business, right? And it's a lot of hard work. And if you don't take care of your health, how many of you found that it's a little harder to run your business? And the thing that's shocking to me, which I'm going to show you today, is if you can understand the numbers in your labs, and if you can understand just a few little details about your health, it will give you far more creativity, far more value, far more energy to run your business. And then your business doesn't run your life. Your health is your number one priority again. So he found that his body and mind synced up. Once he started focusing on his health, he had the synchronization of his body and mind. How many of you, your brain just leads you around to do this task, this meeting. Now we got to do company culture. The last person just made me feel really guilty because I'm like, I have no idea if we're doing those things, but people seem happy at my organization. But what Manuel found is that he's compounding now. Because how many of you have ever invested money, right? And you've got a compounding interest, hopefully, going on. With inflation, good luck. It needs to be like 300% compounding. But what about your health? Has anyone ever invested in their health? And like maybe you got fit for a certain event and you notice that there's a compounding benefit to that. Yeah, I think the best investment I make every year, every day, is an investment in my health. Manuel called me a compounding catalyst. He said he's physically back to himself. Not a 2.0 version, but a 1.0. What that means is he went back to his original state when he's younger. He's like fit as he used to be. His daughter's a really competitive tennis player. He can play with her now. He says he's got a high and constant level of energy. My life has no finish line. How many of you just, you're so tired at night, you just dream about the day where you could just sell your business? I had one of my clients, and I was reading his labs, and he built a big data processing company. And I was asking him, I go, so what do you do for work? And he said, well, I just sold my business. And as a matter of fact, I just got the wire. I spent 20 years building this thing. And there's the wire, $32 million. And I said, oh, wow, congratulations. A lot of hard work and paid off. He's like, how do you feel? And he's like, I don't care. He's like, it doesn't matter at all anymore because his health was so low. When we looked at his testosterone, I'm going to show you these numbers in a minute, but his testosterone was 132. I mean, he had no juice. He was lost motivation. He was about 60 pounds overweight. He still keeps sending me these texts like, Regan, you didn't warn me how expensive the clothing bill would be as I worked with you. So he keeps getting his suits tailored, and then he has to go shopping again, and he looks great. But that's a big deal. He also, the other thing, massive self-confidence. This is Manuel now. Lower stress, more social. He used to just, do the work and then go and retreat. He's like a hibernating bear. Now he's active, he's confident, he loves it. So in the people that we work with, one of the things that we look at is we say, where do you want to be 10 years from now? Because how many of you would want to be in a healthier place 10 years from now than you are today? I think all of us would be, unless you're just like, well, I hate my life, so hopefully I don't make it 10 years. And in that case, like, you probably don't want to be here hanging out with me. But we work with phenomenal people. Dan Sullivan, he's been my biggest referral source for about a decade in Strategic Coach. Shannon's here talking. She's looking phenomenal. But Dan's got a goal to live to be 156. And so I'm just looking for someone to beat him. Anyone interested in living that long? I always tell people, like, I have a really ambitious longevity goal, but the priority to that is I want to die fast when it's my time, because there's this thing that happens during the last decade of our life, and it's considered like the marginal decade is what Peter Attia calls it, and that's the decade where most people are enjoying life in front of a TV, right? I mean, there's great programs on, don't get me wrong, but a decade of watching TV gets a little old and the food's not great. But the real thing that I've seen in my practice, we've helped over 70,000 clients. EastWest Health, I founded it in 2004. We're celebrating our 20th year in about 2 weeks. It's pretty exciting. But I see that people who make it to this unreasonable age, they all take care of their health along the way. And especially what you do between the ages of 44 and about 60, that's what moves the needle into what the last decade of your life will be like. If you're over 60, I mean, there's no hope. I wouldn't even, like, no, I'm joking. There's plenty we can do. All right, so let's talk about how this one simple test. First of all, how many of you have had blood work ran recently? And how many of you have been to your doctor when you had your blood work ran and you said, man, I got really no value out of that? Because it's just like, yeah, everything looks normal. Have you heard that? Even though you're like, well, why am I getting fatter, more depressed? And I think I'm getting dumber, but I can't remember. Actually, that probably came off as offensive. I mean, I should have said uglier too. No. But that's one of the things that happened to me. Growing up on a farm, I had dreams of being anything but a rancher when I grew up. And, like I mentioned, my uncle was a doctor, and so I was like, I'm going to do really well in school, but I had a policy, no homework in school. So I learned this memorization technique, and then I could just really do my assignments fast, turn them in, and be done. And I actually did accomplish that. It was pretty cool. But I mean, essays, I'd have to write those, but anything else, all the busy work, I just got that out of the way. But when I was in my undergraduate work, just starting the University of Utah's medical program, I got really sick. I started noticing my hair was thinning. I got, my skin was, I had psoriasis. I had sore joints. I was tired all the time. I'd go to sleep at night, and I would be so restless at night, I couldn't sleep, and then I'd wake up the next morning more tired than before I went to bed. I had 2 hours where my brain was lucid, and I went to 5 different doctors, and they read my labs, and they all said, everything looks normal. And that's what I've seen in looking at over 10,000 labs, is there's just not a lot of data that your doctor's looking at. And so I finally went to a naturopathic doctor who's also an acupuncturist. So he studied Eastern medicine too, and he ran the right labs and discovered I had an autoimmune disease. So when I started running around in cowboy boots, I was running around moving sprinkler pipe. Has anyone moved sprinkler pipe? Any real men in the room? You have. You know how it is. Yeah, and so, you want to move the line. Well, my goal was to move the line as fast as I could, and then I could sneak out on my dirt bike and go and jump at 130 feet alone. It was just crazy. Now I look back, my poor mom. But it was, when I was moving sprinkler pipes, sometimes planes would come and crop dust the fields, or they'd be in the field next door, and the wind would blow all the Roundup on me. And then I'd go back to the farm, and on the Teton River, there's a lot of what's called leafy splurge, and there's this toxic plant for cattle, so I would spray Roundup on that. And the sales rep said, it's so safe you could drink it. I was like, well, all right. So I didn't care. I'm getting swimming in it, and I was like, Mom, I don't need a shower. I got crop dusted today. And what we related my autoimmunity to was the amount of chemicals I was exposed to. Now, there's a worse chemical than glyphosate right now that's hidden. I don't know if you guys know of it, but it's the vegetable oils, the plant oils. It's in all of our foods. And that is causing a lot of inflammation, but one of the things that gets missed is when you have your labs ran, there's not a lot of conversations around the causative factors. So this is one of my patients, Greg, and I'll give you a couple case studies here, but he's an architect, and he had to sell his firm. And I'll tell you about the transformation he made. This is Tammy. You can see her face before she started working with us, and then you can see it after, like a complete transformation. Somebody who didn't know what her next step was in life. She was lost. This is my friend Charlie, looking solid. His wife's really happy with the progress he's made. He felt like his health was slowly slipping away. This is Zach. He had a financial, like a fintech company. You guys probably know what that is. I think it stands for financial technology, but don't want to sound like I know what I'm talking about in a room full of tech people. And when the market did the weird thing in 22, he had to jump in, and he almost had a heart attack. I mean, he was on the verge of a massive cardiac event. Do you guys know of anyone who's had heart attacks earlier than what you anticipated? My brother-in-law just had a heart attack 2 months ago, and it was the widowmaker artery, the LAD. It was like 99% occluded. It took him 7 hours to put a stent in and open it up. And he's my age, and he was the dude that was always kind of making fun of me at family parties. I'd bring my own food if I had to. I wouldn't eat if it was, I was just like, it's just not worth it to me, it's just food, like who cares? And he was drinking his Cokes and all this stuff. And guess who was the first person he called as soon as he could, right when he got out of the hospital? Now we're working with him. I'm like, dude, my job is to prevent that shit from happening in the first place. Like, where were you before? And so now it was that wake-up call that shook him. So some of us, our rock bottom has to be really low. Hopefully today I can help you guys understand it doesn't have to be that way. Zach, he came to us just in time. How many of you have loved ones, like people in your family, who you wish they'd get their health sorted out? Really important. This is my brother. He runs our operations, and he's lost 55 pounds. And 10 years ago, he left the corporate world and came and worked with me. He's 10 years younger, but it was our nieces and nephews. We'd ask, who's older? And they would always say him. He's like, all right, this is not cool. We've ran over 10,000 labs, and just by getting your blood work done can show you exactly what you can do to create more energy in your life, find out where the interferences are, where the deficiencies, and actually it's a pretty easy process. So as we talk about this, how many of you have to do diagnostic testing before you can actually help a client with their tech problems? Do you guys solve tech problems? I think a lot of you probably do. Probably the same in health, right? There's a lot of people who just follow the influencers. You can't have no idea how many messages I get every day, like, hey, I heard this person say that. Is that appropriate for me? And just so you know, the response is always like, it depends on what your lab shows. So just like you guys, it's like you're not going to go and like take apart someone's I guess you don't take apart software. Whatever you guys do, you're not going to do it unless you know what the problem is first, I'd hope. Same thing in medicine. So here's Greg, 30 pounds overweight, knee and joint pain, and he wanted to be able to golf again. He sold his architecture firm, and he sold it for one reason, because he lost his memory. He could walk into a building and he could remember the dimensions. So he designed one of the most beautiful buildings he designed was the pharmacy center, the new pharmacy building at the U about maybe 8 years ago now. And he could remember all of those dimensions, but he sold his firm because he couldn't remember the dimensions. He was getting burned out. He was tired a lot. And so he sold it and was working as a consultant. And I told him, I said, there's 3 ways that we help every single person. The first thing we have to do is analyze where your body's breaking down in function. So if you think of health in 2 ways, just simplify it. Where's your interferences and where's your deficiencies? How many of you know if you have vitamin, mineral, hormone, peptide deficiencies? Some of you do. You probably ran your labs if you do know. And then where are the interferences? So we call it the epic interferences. So you have 4 areas that interfere with your body's ability to heal. Emotional triggers. Has anyone ever had any emotional issues? Probably not in this room. Life's been pretty easy, I'd imagine, right? I think the last speaker talked about stress, like it can be a literal killer. So the emotional trauma that we have, that's where I love it when monks write the book, like, I've been meditating for 10 years alone. I'm like, you have no idea what life's like. All right, the second thing is the physical traumas. Anyone had any injury, surgery, especially the traumatic brain injuries. I had 6 concussions. I've had at least 6. And so I used to have pretty severe ADD until about 10 years ago. I learned this cool technique, which I'll share with you, to treat my brain. And I think ADD is getting worse and worse. Have you guys ever looked at social media feeds? It's just crazy. I'm like, how do you, like my wife, she's like, you need to get on Instagram. I'm like, no, my team can post for me. I don't even, like, that's scary stuff. Like my brain's a little fragile guy. My brain is so fragile, I have to wear like little baby hats. Like one day my wife was like throwing away this little hat and I'm like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, it's for infants. And I was like, no, that's the hat I wear. I wear it under my snowboarding helmet. But anyway, so analyze the data. And then once you analyze it, then you can see what you need to optimize. And then once the optimization happens, that's where the transformation occurs, because the energy that you create is directly proportional to your health. So how many of you would love to just have endless amounts of energy, where you have energy from the moment you wake up until night when you get tired around 9 o'clock and you actually go to bed on time, right? Follow the circadian rhythms. That's the goal. So most people, they think that their health is failing in stage 3 or stage 4. This is what Western medicine is designed to do, is to diagnose you when your health has fallen off a cliff. How many of you would prefer to get ahead of it before it actually got down to the disease state? I mean, makes sense, right? But in practice, it's one thing, right? It's like, how many of you will take action on something if there's not a big problem? Like my brother-in-law, right? He waited until it was too late. He'll never fully recover. Like when I looked at his labs, we ran him about 3 weeks after his heart attack, and I'm like, the amount of proteins that are still circulating in his blood from the cardiac tissue that was damaged is just like, it's building up scar tissue, and we're using like these cool peptides, and we're trying to create angiogenic properties in his body, but he's never going to recover. It's too bad. So the place where we want to focus on is making sure that we keep you in optimal health. And so when we run labs, we send you the lab course. So those of you who are like, hey man, I want to get a deep, comprehensive lab ran, I've got a code for you guys, and I think in the app you can, if you guys want to send me a message in the app, I'll give you the code, or you can come up afterwards, and you can go get your blood work ran. Is anyone from Canada here? Well, you guys are on your own. I mean, it's like... actually, if you are, we work with a lot of Canadians, but I can send you the requisition, you can take it to your doctor, and then you can get your blood work ran in about 17 months from now. So hopefully you don't die before I can take a look at them, but if you're sticking around in Florida, my team will help you find a LabCorp here in Florida. They're everywhere, so we can send you there. But here's Greg's Labs. So the first thing you want to look at is your blood sugar. Anyone ever crave sugar in this room? There's one solution for sugar cravings. What's that? No, it's actually easier than that. We just put a surveillance camera and a shock collar on you. Exercise is like takes work. We just shock you. But actually, yeah, the big thing is looking at insulin resistance. So when your body has blood sugar issues, you've got an energy crisis. You've got too much sugar in the blood, and so you're leaking out all the energy. It's not getting into the cells. And then anytime sugar is high, that's when we start getting damage to our cardiovascular system. And this is really important. So with Greg, I asked him, do you crave sugar? He's like, oh man, at night I go crazy. How many of you get like a little munchies after dinner? There's a really interesting research done by Sachin Panda. It's called Circadian Code. It's a great book, but he found that 50% of Americans, I don't know Canadians, sorry, but 50% of Americans, they eat more calories after dinner than they eat for dinner itself. So I'll give you one solution you can do. This is what I started doing once I read that study. I'm like, oh, yes, because sometimes, especially if you're stressed, how many of you kind of lean on food to give you the little comfort at the end of the night, and you're just like, oh, but I work so hard, I deserve this Manhattan, or whatever it is. I had a friend of mine who I've been working with, and he does stand-up comedy, and then he's like a financial guy. But I'm like, yeah, your Manhattans are killing you. He's like on this, like his diet's perfect, and then at night, he's like, but Regan, I work so hard. I'm like, to hell with your hard work. You're gonna die early because of a Manhattan. Are you serious? You know, like we justify the weirdest things in our minds, and we just think like, oh, it's okay, it's no big deal. But if you kind of look at the future and you say, okay, just imagine that 10-year framework, you know, where do you want to be? But getting rid of the sugar is a big thing. I looked at his blood urea nitrogen. He wasn't digesting his proteins properly, so he did have a lot of digestive issues. His anion gap was really high, and that relates to the amount of stress in his nervous system. We see this in entrepreneurs, like 95% of you are going to have elevated anion gaps. Then I asked him on his liver enzymes, I'm like, do you drink any alcohol, Greg? And he's like, and by the way, this is not me being like, hey, you guys are probably like, he's from Utah and they don't drink alcohol in Utah. That's not it. I love a good drink occasionally. Mezcal is my favorite, but you know, it's like, you got to limit it, but only when my liver enzymes are healthy. So I said, do you drink alcohol? And he's like, oh, just a little bit. I said, what's a little bit to you? And he's like, well, only when I take clients out, you know, because he was a consultant now. And I said, well, how often do you take clients out? He's like, well, I don't know, 2-3 times a week. I'm like, well, how many drinks do you have? He's like, 3-4 drinks. I'm like, okay. What about the weekends? And he's like, no, we don't drink on the weekends unless people come over. I said, well, how often do you have company? He's like, well, oh yeah, Friday, Saturday. We got a great entertainment area in our house, you know, the justification. I'm like, look, I'm not judging, I'm just asking. I'm trying to get the real data so I can see, is it alcohol that's causing this or something else? That's really all I was doing. And it turns out he was enjoying about 24 drinks a week. And I said, man, I would love for that to be part of the longevity program, but it just hasn't ever penciled out. So sometimes we don't even realize the damage that we're doing to our body. His ferritin was really high. So ferritin is a protein that stores iron inside of the red blood cell. And the school I ended up going to, I left the University of Utah's medical program and I went to this really cool integrated medical school in Hawaii that was founded by Earl Bakken. He's the inventor of the pacemaker. And the whole program was built around preventative medicine and helping people avoid getting the pacemaker installed. So pretty cool. So we've helped, I mean, now I have cardiologists who will write me like personalized notes on the labs of the clients that they send, and they're like, thank you, you reversed, you know, the congestive heart failure. But one of the markers that doesn't get ran is ferritin. Like you probably won't see it on your labs. You're probably not gonna see this other marker called homocysteine, and that shows the levels of systemic inflammation. You're not going to see like C-peptide and insulin fasting typically too, unless you're at an endocrinologist. But we want to run the right data, so we run over 100 markers to figure out where your body is. Homocysteine is a marker that shows how much inflammation there is in your brain. So remember Greg, he couldn't remember the dimensions of the buildings that he'd architected. And I said, well, did you ever have any concussions? And he's like, no. I said, what kind of sports did you play? He's like, well, I played football a little bit as a kid, and then I played rugby between the ages of 20 and 30, because he was a wrestler too, and then they cut the wrestling team at his college, and so they're like, why don't you play rugby? And he's like, okay. And I was like, well, did you ever get your bell rung? He's like, oh yeah, like blacked out or knocked out? Yeah, all the time. I'm like, that's a concussion. And he's like, yeah, happened about a couple times a week, you know? So, and you could see, like, you don't want that marker above 6. His was 27 0.2. And so we did a treatment on him, and the same treatment I did for my brain, and within 3 weeks, he could remember the dimensions of the buildings. Phenomenal, just by removing the inflammation in the brain. Really cool stuff. His testosterone, 412, he's like, my doctor just ran this and said my testosterone's great. Well, blood work is based on averages. And every year, they look at averages, and then they put you in the camp of, as long as you're within the 90% parameter, you're healthy. And everything's normal. Are 90% of Americans healthy? Or Canadians, for that matter? I'm not bashing. You guys are the sweetest humans on the planet. I go to Toronto, I'm like, this is a big city with like manners. It's cool. Anyway, but his testosterone 412, and so you want it between 700 to about 1,000. Unless you don't like feeling like your best self, because here's the disadvantage of testosterone if you optimize it. You're gonna have great libido. I mean, who wants that? Second disadvantage is you're gonna actually enjoy the work that you do better, so you're gonna get benefits from the work you do, so you may actually get more creative. And the other thing that's a disadvantage is you're probably gonna put on a little more muscle and hold on to it. And this goes for women and men. So it's good for the brain, it's good for the heart, good for the muscle. When we got his testosterone optimized, he was feeling great. And then you can see his eosinophils were high, so we had to work on some of the allergies he had. So one of the things I'm gonna be doing tomorrow is I'm hosting a peptide party. Have you guys ever had peptides? You guys know what they are? So have you guys ever used Legos? Aren't they cool? All peptides are is it's the way that your cells, it's like the shapes of proteins. Imagine like the balloon guy, at the fair or whatever. And the peptides are just very particular protein structures that bind on receptors in the cell wall, and they turn on genes that can express health and get you feeling really good. And there's a lot of popularity in peptides recently, but we've been looking at peptides for over 100 years. Your body has over 7,000 of them. So far, we've only sequenced about 10%. And so what we do is we use all the peptides that are naturally occurring in your body, and we just go in and we just clear up the cell signaling. It's kind of like if you didn't have Wi-Fi in this room and you're trying to do a Zoom call, it'd be pretty patchy. It's the same thing with your peptides. As you start building up inflammation, as you start drinking 24 drinks a week, whatever. But that causes this disturbance in these peptides that are released. And then the other thing that it does beat the alternative is the problem called aging. And as we age, it does cause this decrease of peptides. So I got into peptides about 10 years ago before they were kind of cool. And I found them because I was working on my brain health. After I did the intranasal stem cells, I was like, man, my brain feels so good. And I started studying ways that I could just continually optimize it. And that's where I landed in all these groups of using peptides for brain health, which at the peptide party tomorrow, you guys will have access. We're gonna do it's literally a party. It's the funnest party, and you'll leave feeling different than when you come in, guaranteed, or your money back. There's no money to give back, so it's like, well, maybe, I don't even know. But, so one of the peptides, tirzepatide, this is the fastest way. This is a peptide that many of you may know. It's a GLP-1 agonist with the GIP. So it works on that satiation pathway. How many of you just get so overwhelmed because your body always wants food? It's like you're hungry all the time, or you want sugar, or you just need to scratch the biological itch. And so that's because a lot of us have this leptin-resistant response because we have too much inflammation in our body, and it's because we don't have the proper excretion of GLP-1. So tirzepatide, it's in the clinical studies. It is FDA approved to treat blood sugar issues, diabetes, things like that. But what we found is that people who took tirzepatide were able to lose about 20% of their total body weight in less than a year. And that's what we've seen in our clients. Many of you saw them. There's a new one called retatrutide that's a triple agonist. It's really phenomenal. We got them on tesamorelin. That's a peptide that works on the growth hormone. It helps you build muscle. We got him on 5-amino-1-MQ as well, and that helps with, it's really good for the mitochondria, but it's great for the skeletal muscle. So he started golfing. His golf game improved. We got him on testosterone, but we also put him on ganadorelin. There's a lot of drive-by testosterone clinics where people just think, all I need is a testosterone. Well, if you get on it before your body's ready to handle that, you'll feel great for a year, and then your whole endocrine system will crash. And we clean up a lot of messes from people who aren't running the proper labs before they get on testosterone. So that's where ganadorelin is important, because it keeps your body producing testosterone on its own. Otherwise, your body just turns off the production. BPC is a great peptide for joint health and pain. Epitalin, we got them on some MOD-SC, which is mitochondrial peptide. And then NAD, have you guys heard of NAD? Like, it's a sirtuin activator, so it cleans up all of the malware in the DNA. Was that pretty good use of your terminology? I should have actually done more research. I'm sorry. You guys are awake. Did he say malware? Stem cells. How many of you know what stem cells are? We're going to be talking about this tomorrow too, and we get orders from these perinatal sources. In Utah, we now have this cool law that I only worked 14 years to get passed. Sat on the medical board for 7 years, most boring time of my life. But now we have a protected zone where we can do some of these stem cell therapies, and it's been really exciting. We treated Greg's knees. We got some of the cartilage back so he can walk without pain. This is someone who had their shoulder treated. This is a patient at her hip. This is what happens when you get an IV. We'll talk about this a little more tomorrow. I'm really not planting the seed for you guys. This is not me selling you to come tomorrow. There's no, by the way, but I'm just running out of time. So if this is of interest to you, come tomorrow. All right, so one of the things that, I apologize. There we go. Okay, so one of the things that we found is if you can get the right tests, you can actually create the right strategy and the right treatment plan to really start making big changes in your life. When I graduated, the academic dean at my school, he said, medicine is 25 years behind the research. He said, don't fall into that category. So one thing we've always tried to do is, I call my company EastWest, because we're rooted in the things that have always worked for health, because I believe that biology, yes, it's changed a lot, but not that fast. I mean, evolution takes a long time, so we keep the things that worked 3,000 years ago, bring them into today's life, which you guys did this morning. Was that kind of a weird exercise, or did you guys expect it when you walked in? Probably. The Canadians expect all the weirdness. Good, we're in Florida. But then we also look at the innovations, and you can't bring in innovations without having the science and actually having the context to look at the body. So we have 3 philosophies. Number 1 is we want to make your next decade your best decade and your healthiest decade. We want to make sure there's no death by neglect and no surprises. There's 2 ways you can neglect your health. Way number 1 is you don't get the right tests at the right time. And then the second way is a lot of people get the tests and then they don't do anything about it. Tests don't save your life, by the way. So we put together a very streamlined program because what we believe is that when health improves, everything improves. So what would improve in your personal life if you had optimal health? I mean, what if you did have better energy? What if you did have more mental clarity? Would that make a bigger difference for you or your spouse or your team? I mean, who would benefit just by you getting healthy? And then this is what we see when people actually engage and they start working on their health. We've got a very predictable system. We work 99% of our practice is just entrepreneurs, people who, they're busy, they run businesses, they want to optimize. And so I've learned, because I'm an entrepreneur myself, I've learned that you guys need results quickly. So within 30 days is usually the time and when people start noticing a difference. They're like, man, I think I've lost weight. I'm feeling stronger. My workouts are better. So typical people in our 6-month program, they have a 2 times increase in energy, 82% improvement in sleep, 5 pounds increase in lean muscle mass. When we can, put them on our scan, or we'll send you to a DEXA scan to look at that. 93% in overall well-being. And if you have weight to lose, we see people lose about 30 pounds in 6 months. It's not uncommon. Because we do put duct tape over your mouth for the entire 6 months. So, yeah. So this is our team here, and we'd love to work with people who want to prioritize their health, and that's what we found in over 70,000 people we work with. This is not everybody, but it's a snapshot of the best-looking ones only. All right, so I'm going to open it up questions. How many of you actually would love to get your labs done? Like, if that's okay, so several of you have. This is where I need Sonny in the room, because he would be like, well, part of your link here, I sent the link to Sonny on a text, but I realized it was the wrong person. It'd be like sending me a link. I'm like, send it to one of these guys, But anyway, so I'll be here. I've got the link in my phone. And any questions that you guys have, go ahead.
I know you were making light of it earlier for the folks from Canada, but legitimately, where do you go get, do you know?
Yeah. You do have to go to your doctor and get it, or we can use a company called Cyfox, and they send you this kit, and you have to like put blood spots on it. And as long as you can follow instructions, we can do that for you. But otherwise, you can just go to your,
I know you can walk into like a Life Labs and get your blood work done, but you need to have a requisition form or whatever before they'll do it.
Yeah. So we give you the requisition form, and then whatever you guys can find there, it's great.
For the cravings, you mentioned like stop eating at a certain time, or what's the best way to do it?
So after dinner, brush your teeth, and then you're not tempted. It's the most important thing. I failed to mention that. I apologize. So yeah, if you just brush your teeth right after you eat dinner, and then you come and like you're doing the dishes and stuff, and
What time is best to finish your last meal?
3 hours before you go to sleep. So it's the 3-2-1 method is 3 hours before you go to bed, stop eating, and ideally that would be like around like 6:37, and then 2 hours before you go to bed, stop drinking, because unless you love waking up at night to urinate, it just doesn't work that well. And then 1 hour before you go to bed is when we want you thinking politics. So watch CNN, Fox News, as many screens as possible, and just like bask in all the stress that you have no control over. So get rid of blue lights. I know that's hard for you guys. Get rid of all that. The EMFs can be pretty damaging for your sleep cycles. Hour before you go to bed, read a book, make love, all the old-fashioned things. Awesome. Okay.
In the Manhattan is when?
Usually about 30 minutes before you go to bed, so you just but drink it fast, like several, like a whole slew of them, and just.
But don't eat the cherry, because that was 3 hours.
Thank you. Yes, that's food.
What about the water consumption? Like 8 glasses a day, is it a myth? I also heard that, that whole, like you have to drink like 3 gallons of water or something. That's crazy.
3 gallons? You would die. So you can actually. Yeah. I mean, you can.
What's the normal in water intake?
I hate to sound like a scientist, but it depends on your labs. It depends on your level of activity, where you live. Like if you're in Florida and you're out running all the time, like you're going to need a lot more water than you will in Canada, where you guys get sun for 2 weeks out of the year. Actually, I do love Canada. It's great. All right. Any other questions that you guys have, or if you guys would like to stick around for more dad jokes, they're just starting.